Well, hello. I'm so glad you stopped by. I'm Sherry, and this is Quilts and Other Happy Accidents. I've been wanting to make a sampler quilt, and I've been seeing tutorials for that Block of the Month Club and things like that. And I was like, well, that's interesting. But I really kind of wanted to, of course, put my own twist on it. And I started researching calendar quilts. Now, there's lots of ways to do that. And then I was like, or I could merge them and do a sampler quilt featuring holidays or seasons in each block. That sound like a good idea. So I found this website called Quilt Therapy, and they have quilted kitchen blocks, and they create the blocks, and then they actually give you a recipe that features. And they had put one together, a quilted kitchen sampler, and it looks like this. Now, the reason this appealed to me was they'd already put the blocks together and they're 12-inch blocks, so you don't have to make a bazillion of them. Also, I could use some practice making my half square triangles and my flying geese, which have never been my strength. Somehow, straight lines and I have problems. So I thought, all right, it's summer. I'm going to pull out my red, white, and blue fabric, and I'm going to make a block. Reminds me of 4th of July. Okay. And this block is even called Stars and Pinwheels. Well, what could be better for July? But I read their instructions and read their instructions and read their instructions and could not figure out what they were talking about. Cut 2 3 7/8 inch squares, which will create 4 half square triangles. Cut 2 3 7/8 squares, which are paired with the results of the white 4.5 inch squares and the result of the pink 4.5 inch square, which will create the what? Oh, good. Cut 4 3 7/8 inch squares, then cut the squares diagonally corner to corner, one at a time, so you end up with 2 triangles per square. Are you kidding me? I don't want bias cuts. That never goes well. And these instructions just befuddled me. But I forged on and I did it their way. And here's what I got. I got this. And you can clearly see there's a problem here. I got the pinwheel going the right way, but I don't have all the white pieces going because I had triangles laying all over the place and I couldn't figure out which one went with which. I thought, enough of that. I'm going to do it my way. So let me show you the simplified Sherri instructions. Okay, maybe they're a little oversimplified, but I had to break it out so that I could figure it out so I could share it with you. Let's get going and see if it works. So as I read those very complicated instructions, I broke it out by color: fabric A, fabric B, fabric C, red, blue, and white. And I need a total of 8 3 7/8 inch squares. Well, I'm actually going to cut them 4 inches because I would rather give myself some extra room and square them up. A lot of times I find, especially with half square triangles, even though they're straight lines and they should be very easy, this instruction wanted me to use a scant 1/4 inch seam. Well, I don't know what they define as a scant 1/4 inch, so I'm going to use an actual 1/4 inch seam. So I made my squares 4 inches square. So there's our red. Our blue, we only need one 4.5 inch square, no changes there. Our white, Again, we're going to make half square triangles. So I've cut two that are 4 inches, one that is 4.5, and one that is 7.25. Now we're going to divide them up so that we can build our blocks. And if you look at this picture, you can see we need 4 half square triangles, and that finished block size is going to be 3.5 inches. So let's put our red and our white together. Face together, that is. We're going to take and draw a line right down the middle. Rather than cutting it like the original instructions said, I'm going to draw this line, and I'm going to use that as my quote raw edge, and sew 1/4 inch on each side, which will give me 4 half square triangles. All right, I have sewn 1/4 inch seam on each side of my diagonal line. And you can see I clipped them because I really didn't want this fabric moving around. Now, for those of you that are having some sort of a meltdown because I'm using scissors, if you want, you can absolutely use your rotary cutter and cut these apart, but you don't have to. All right, and there's my 4 half square triangles. I'm going to press them, and I am going to press it so it goes to the dark side. You could press them open. You can do whatever you want with it. But we're just going to do it that way for simplicity's sake. All right, now let's go back to our map here. We need to make 4 flying geese units. They're each going to measure 6.5 inches by 3.5 inches before we put our block together. So let's start there with flying geese. The original instructions for making these flying geese was to cut these into triangles along a bias edge, and that just doesn't work for me. So I'm going to keep it really simple, and we're going to use our cheater method for flying geese. I'm drawing a line diagonally on each of these units rather than cutting them. Again, I'm going to clip these so they stay right where I want them, because these corners need to match up as perfectly as possible. Then we're going to do the same thing here and get that diagonal to match up as perfectly as possible. And yes, they're going to overlap, but that's okay. Again, we're going to pretend I cut this, but I didn't. And we're going to take it over to the machine here and use my 1/4 inch measurement and sew along the diagonal. So as you can see, I've got my 1/4 inch foot on, and I've got it so the diagonal is right along. We're pretending that's our cut edge, and we're going to make a 1/4 inch seam on each side. Well, I don't know if you can see, but I've already used this line and created a seam a 1/4 inch away. Now we're going to sew on the other side. I like using these thread bunnies. That way I don't have to trim so many threads at the end. We're going to cut along that diagonal. And there is 1/2 of our flying goose unit. I'm going to take this to the machine and press it towards the red, and then we're going to make the second half. I'll be very honest, the first time I made the flying goose unit with this technique, my brain just got a little scrambled because that does not look anything like a flying goose to me. But you're going to love this because there's no bias edges that are going to stretch and change the shape of your goose. And there's no waste, no trimming. And I don't know about you, but I've got enough scraps. Okay, now that our line is on there again, we're going to do the same exact thing. We're going to line this up, matching this corner as much as we can. We're going to clip it in place. We keep it from wiggling around. And we're going to, again, pretend this is a cut line and make sure that our 1/4 inch seam is lined up with there, or your foot is lined up with that quote edge. Then we're going to turn around and do the other side. See? Now watch the magic happen. Ta-da! One perfect flying goose. Got plenty of space there. We're going to trim this so it measures 6.5 by 3.5. We're going to press the seam towards the red. Easy peasy. Let's make the last block of this sub block. So now we're going to make the split 1/4 square triangles. Very similar to half square triangles, but not. Let me show you how to do it. Right. This is the 4.5 inch white and the 4.5 inch blue square. I'm squaring them up and we're going to make a half square triangle first. So let's just clip this and do like we did before, sewing along using that line as our imaginary cut edge. I'm going to cut along this line. I'm going to take it to the ironing board and press it to the red. half square triangle number 1, half square triangle number 2. Now, the only trick to this is this line should be perpendicular to to this seam, because what we want is half of this to be lined up with half of that. Okay, let's make it happen. My clips on, just to keep it from wiggling around. The thing I'm really watching here is to make sure this corner on this red square lines up with the seam on both sides. We're going to be able to trim this, but if that seam isn't on the halfway mark, they're going to look a little wonky, and we don't want that. Let me double check this one. There we go. There's the seam on the corner. There's the seam on the corner. Let's sew. Don't freak out that your half square triangles are a different size than this square. Remember, we cut those blocks at 4 inches, not 3 7/8. We gave ourselves some room, some forgiveness room, so that we could square the blocks up rather than have uneven seams when we put all these sub pieces together. Oopsies. I'm going to cut and press these. Then we're going back to the mat so we can square everything up and put it together. It's so much easier to do it this way than with all those little triangles and bias edges. For those of you that started quilting with those instructions, bless your heart. I don't think I would have stayed in quilting this long if I'd had to do that. Well, here we are. My pinwheel is going the right way. My flying geese are flying, and my half square triangles line up. So much easier than the old instructions. I'm going to go ahead and put this block together and press it and show you its final outcome. Well, there it is, the finished product, block 1 of my sampler quilt. This is the Stars and Pinwheels quilt block. I'll put the link below. If you'd care to join me to go ahead and make your own sampler quilt based on the calendar, I'd love that. Send me your pictures. Until next time, have a great day.